Welcome to the Penny for Your Thoughts podcast. This is your weekly insight into the small businesses of London. Today we are talking all things investment with James Symes, who is the co-founder of Bike Club. Right, James, thank you for joining us today. We're going to chat a little bit about the Bike Club.
Thanks, Elspeth. Thanks for having me today. I'm the oldest guest you've had on this podcast. I'm very nervous because they all look really cool, the other guests, and I'm not.
Don't be fooled. It's you that they're all looking up to secretly.
Really?
They won't admit it yet, but they are.
Well, that's kind. Very kind. Okay, so
the Bike Club, what is it? Why did you start it? Where did it come from?
So most people think it's one of those businesses you start when you get kids. So I'll tell you what we actually did. So Bike Club is subscription kids bikes. You pay a monthly fee and about £5 to £15 a month, and we send you a bike for your child, and your child then rides around that bike, and as they grow out of it, we exchange it and you get the bigger one, basically. So we are the biggest kids bike rental fleet in the world. We've got just under 40,000 bikes now.
Wow.
We're the second biggest bike rental fleet in the world as well. So there's one more that's a little bit bigger than us. Well, quite a lot bigger than us, but we're going to get there. We started in 2016. I'm like a sort of consumer finance geek. I come from financial services, and my brother is a sustainability scientist. Effectively, he works for the OECD, and he introduced to me this idea of the circular economy. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's this idea that you can keep products going round and fixing them. Now, a lot of people have looked at this from a design-led angle, right? So like IKEA are into like how can you design furniture to be more modular, mm-hmm. whereas no one was looking at it from a financial services angle. So actually, how do you deliver this product to someone? And so I got really interested in this idea of why don't we take like-minded borrowers and homogenous assets and then put the two together. And we started with like 25 grand worth of capital, so quite a small amount of capital. And when you're starting a consumer finance business, that's not a lot. And so we couldn't really get into cool stuff like cars and all that sort of stuff. I was really into cycling at the time, doing lots of triathlons, if you can believe it. And we're looking at that. I was like, yeah, let's do a tri-bikes. That'd be really cool. And we'll do that. I was probably like your age at that point. Anyway. Looking at the market research, we then realised that actually the kids bike segment is a massive segment of the market, huge amounts of volumes. And kids you never need to own a kid's bike, right? You actually want to exchange as they grow. Mm-hmm. In fact, the old bike is totally delinquent and they usually end up rusting in the back of sheds. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we came up with pay monthly kids bikes you exchange as children grow. And then that's grown into this sort of subscription kids bikes, and we've come to realise it's much more of a sort of hassle-free service we offer parents. It's less about affordability. It's more about actually offering people a really good end-to-end service and giving families a really great introduction into cycling. And that's how it sort of developed as a business.
Awesome. And there is some congratulations in order.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
There is. So we just reached a massive milestone this week. So we just hit our Series B. So we just closed a £16.75 million equity round.
Awesome. Congratulations.
It was quite, it's a mass, it hasn't really sunk in yet. Mm-hmm. I've never seen that much money in a bank account, or a bank account that I have some control over. And it's like, that's quite epic. So to put it into context, the business itself, we've raised 13.25 million to date. And so this round is a really big step up on where we are. On top of that, we've also got a really exciting debt round going on, but can't really talk too much about that because we're still sort of in the process. The equity side of things is awesome. So we've really secured a great balance sheet for the business to scale.
So let's go over how you got to this point. How did the investment journey start?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you sort of get to these Series B points and you start signing, I think I probably signed about 400 pages worth of legal documents this week. Wow. Not 400 signatures, but there's like a huge sort of Bible of this stuff. And then you go, wow, where did this actually start? And I alluded to it already. We started with £25,000, right? That was an inheritance, from my grandmother. And I remember being like, what do I do with this money? Do I put it into my mortgage, or do I just start a business? And I was like, actually, I really want to start a business. And that's sort of how we started there. So problem with our business is it's not a trading business, it's a lending business. And so it's all about customer behavior, right? So you don't really know how well it's going to go until you start testing it out. Mm-hmm. And so 25 grand, that will probably buy you about 150 odd bikes, right? maybe 100 bikes probably these days. And so we were able to use that money to rent out 100 bikes. And I remember saying when we started really at Christmas 2016, we were like, if we rent 30 bikes by Christmas, we'll stop this. If we rent 60 bikes, we'll keep going. If we rent 100 bikes, we'll all quit our jobs. That's me and my wife. That's who I co-founded it with. And we actually ended up renting 120 bikes, having no money left over by the end of Christmas because we'd spent it all on buying those bikes to rent them out, and being like, oh wow, this is going really well. And then be like, oh wow, we have literally no money and about like a 40 grand credit card bill for whatever reason. So it's like, oh right, that's not great. Okay, so what do? At that point, it's real friends and family stuff, right? So we raised money just from anyone we could possibly find within our own networks, basically. I actually started a business at uni that sort of became relatively successful. Sadly, I have no equity in it, but my friend has done really, really well. He's godfather to my children. And we were walking, that was down in Cornwall, right? And we were walking on some coastline in Cornwall, and he was like, look, can you just shut up about this business? I'm going to give you 50 grand and you're going to go off and do it. And I was like, okay. And he did. He lent us £50,000, right? And then my dad also said, look, if he's doing that, I'll do another 50 grand, right? So that's 100 grand there. And then my uncle also came in and did another sort of random number, 34,000. But yeah, that's whatever it is. That's what it was. And so then we sort of did 134,000 friends and family. Then we had, you're getting the full story here, right?
That's what we want.
And then we had our first baby. So I kept on working, and because we needed a monthly salary. Alex quit her job and she ran the business from the kitchen table. We even had one employee in our flat at the time. I think we had 34 bikes at one point in our flat, which is a 2-bedroom flat in Bannon, so that was not ideal. There's an amazing picture of that. It's also a 3rd floor flat as well, which is also not ideal. Anyway, that sort of went on, and we then had our first baby, and that was in September 2018, and I was then able to take some paid time off work, which was really helpful. And that was when I wrote to... That was when, like, let's do an angel round. We had actually moved into Uncommon by that point, and we were in one of the shared working spaces, and one of the guys there introduced us to a group of investors, and they were really interested. We'd actually got the business to profitability, and it was like doing really, really well, which was really exciting. But we were totally out. We were running out of capital, so we needed to raise money. The problem in my business is that we have to always raise more capital. We can't grow without capital. We're continuously capital constrained. So we often raise equity and then we raise debt, raise equity and then we raise debt. That's kind of how it works in the bike club world. I wrote a random email to a guy called Mike Balfour, who founded Fitness First and had obviously a very successful time doing that. He happened to train as an accountant with my dad 40, 50, 500 years ago or something, sometime in the dark ages. So they're not friends, but he would recognise the surname. And I was like, right, let's just try this, because, you literally try everything. And Mike wrote back within 2 hours, I think.
That's
and I was like, oh, wow. And that was the start of what's been an amazing relationship, actually. Because Mike and I got on really well. I still remember the first pitch meeting. He has like a flat on Park Lane. And he introduced Alex and I. I think Alex was 6 weeks postpartum with Lucy and our first son. So that's like quite, you're still feeling pretty like post-pregnancy, and it's not, you're feeling pretty ropey. And we're like, right, we're going to pitch this meeting. And obviously it's our first baby, so we had no idea what to expect, but it's a child. So Alex was like, I don't know what to do. Anyway, leave the baby with the mother-in-law, and then go into the Park Lane flat and talk to Mike. And yeah, Mike, as it turns out, is a really warm, nice guy, right? But at the time, we're like, oh, who's this scary entrepreneur? He's like doing, OBE, super successful. And I still remember when he turned around and said, right, I can put 200 grand in. And that, at the time, was like, wowzers, that's awesome, right? So then that was awesome. So we raised another 150 grand from these other angels. So that was a 350k round. We converted the existing debt. The friends and family stuff coming in first was convertible. Converted that. So that was like 550 grand's worth of equity, it kind of worked out as. And then also with Mike's credibility, we were able to raise another £500,000 of debt. Going back to it, we buy our bikes and debt generally, and we use the equity to build the business, although it kind of all works in different ways. It gets a bit sort of messy in the middle there. So that was really exciting. We were then able to sort of properly grow the business in 2019. I was able to quit my job and not go back to KPMG and keep going with Bike Club. We got the business sort of past that kind of £1 million revenue threshold, which was just sort of like a key threshold to sort of show traction, right? Mm-hmm. And so especially in like your product as a service business, it's like at that point you've got a few thousand members and it's really starting to move along. Basically, I think we were just under 10,000 or around that sort of number. That's when we started pitching for our sort of Series A, which was going to be about 4 million. But then we started working with Codex Capital, who came in. They know Mike, and Mike introduced us, and actually we were doing the modelling, and it sort of came through. Maybe we need a bit more than that, and so that's when we raised 5.4 million. But then this little thing called coronavirus happened, and yeah, that's when everything kind of goes a bit topsy-turvy. We did pull off the investment round in coronavirus, but it took forever. It was impossible. At the start of coronavirus, we didn't use video calls, and people kind of forget that. And then you're having to pitch to investors with video calls. So you've gone from like no one's ever done an investment without meeting someone face to face to we're now doing the whole thing remotely, basically, and it was just insane. And that's why it took so long to get to that point. We got the Series A sort of done in the end, but that was closed in August, and I still remember. Wow! I forgot. We also did a Crowdcube round to help keep things going. I should really talk more about that, but actually, I'm going to get probably told off by Crowdcube here. But we didn't particularly enjoy that process, right? The reason why we don't get enterprise incentive scheme because we are a rental business. It's a big problem with sharing economy businesses. The EIS treatment you get on it, and so as a result, we really struggled with Crowdcube. We did like a successful. I think it was like 620 grand in the end. So it was like for Crowdcube it was a chunky round, but for the size of the business at the time, it was like that's not actually that much capital. We're going to get through that pretty quickly. And actually, it was I think we generated about 85 to 90% of the funds. So actually Crowdcube itself, from a marketing perspective, probably only generated about 10% of that, or maybe a bit more than that actually, probably about 100 grand of that. So effectively, so that was. It was the guys at Crowdcube are lovely. They're great people, but I think because of the EIS element and because we've always been a bit like rubbish at telling us at like projecting ourselves, I think it just didn't really work out that well. It was actually quite a good process in a way because it really did highlight that fact that if you really want to make this work, you need to be out there doing podcasts with people like you and doing this sort of stuff and like being there and telling the story and across different mediums. And we just weren't doing that. But we did close it. We closed it through coronavirus and it was all good. So that was good. And then we were able to, that gave us the financing to be able to get to the Series A, get that completed. That brought in Codex Capital. That was an interesting round. It was like, as I say, really hard work because of coronavirus. It was really difficult getting it all done. But we got there in the end. And then built the business with Codex. They introduced another debt funder called Triple Point Capital, who came in with a £7.5 million debt fund for us to help build the bikes, which was really cool. And they've been so supportive of the business. Fantastic fund to work with, and really, really great. And then that's allowed us to really scale the business much, much faster. And that got us to what we're calling Series B, that level. And I didn't realise it until I really scared myself at Christmas. I remember reading more about Series B. Christmas is super busy trading for us, so you kind of just think about selling bikes to the whole of December, and then you kind of get to the end of it and you're like, right, okay, what are we doing next year? Oh, we're raising money. Great. That's always a painful time. But then I got served this advert on like LinkedIn from some company somewhere, I don't know, and it was like, did you know 85% of companies fail to reach Series B? 85% of Series A companies fail to reach Series B. And I was like, what? That can't be true, that stat, But then I was talking to our CFO, and he was like, yeah, it basically is true. Look at this, and this. And it's like, oh my God, that's... So you mean we might... This isn't assured this round, So it's like, oh wow, we're actually... This could be, this could be really difficult. And that's the worst place you can be as a startup, particularly when you know you've got traction and you know that, like, broadly speaking, the problems you've got are like executional problems. And then you're like, oh wow, if you, as I say, the worst place you can be is not having the capital to be able to go forth and execute. You really want to be able to have sufficient, if not, and investors hate this word, excess capital, so that you can properly go after this opportunity. And that was the thing at Series A. Even though I said we started at 4 million, raised 5.4, we actually should have raised 8. And so, and as everyone who listens to this podcast will know, if you've got a 2.5 million odd funding gap, that's a real pain. And we've had to stretch and do all sorts of stuff. So it's weird. We look like a super well capitalized company, but actually the truth is we got a couple of numbers wrong in the model, and as a result, in 15 months after Series A, you're like, oh, this is looking quite tight. Actually, we've got to be a bit cautious here, and all that sort of stuff. And that's the worst thing, when you're having to be cautious around resourcing and all of that. You're not able to hire that next developer, you're not able to hire that operations person, whatever it is. That's a real problem. And that's why at Series B, when we came at it, we were like, well, let's take the whole dilution element of funding out the window and say, what is the actual amount of money we need to really go after this idea? And it came in at, 16.75 is where we sort of landed. And it came in at sort of slightly different between those 2 points, between sort of 18 and 14, basically. And that's where we've got to. So we feel like we've done a round that is going to really, really help. Which should really help us put the business in a good place. But yeah, it's still amazing how quickly the money starts going out the door, put it that way. But yeah, but as I say, it was super positive, it's super exciting, and it's amazing to have got the business to this stage, and then it'll be amazing to see where we get to next.
Yeah, so basically. Cool. And that's all happened in like 6 years.
Actually, it's probably a bit less in a way, because we did start in 2016, but there's a whole like faffing around getting consumer credit license, and then there's a bit of sort of like, what are we doing here? What aren't we doing here? I would say that so bootstrapping phase is slightly different from like when we raised external capital. That was 2019 through to this year. So it's happened in 3 years. Wow. Basically, that's the real sort of Because once you've got, when you're bootstrapping, that's actually really good. I actually have a lot. You can't bootstrap the type of business I'm doing, right? Or Alex and I set up. But when I know some really successful like recruitment businesses and podcast businesses and these sort of your creative businesses, and they are bootstrapping, and it's incredible seeing what they've achieved and what they're doing. We're here in Uncommon, and like our neighbours is an amazing tuition business, and it's like he is 100% shareholder, and he's just congratulating me on our funding round. And it's like, actually, mate, I'm sort of jealous of what you've got going on over there. I've got loads of external investors, and once you've got external investors, they are going to look for that return, right? And that's a very cliche thing to say, but there is a need to generate a liquidity event. People aren't just doing this for fun, and you've got to like keep the business moving forward, and everything has to sort of keep happening. I come from a very corporate background, and so I quite like that because it does create some more structure in your sort of entrepreneurial journey. But I think if you're more Puritan entrepreneur, that can be really, really painful and really frustrating.
What do you think in the last 3 years has been the biggest sort of challenge that's constantly presenting itself, whether it be with the investment process itself or challenges with investors?
Look, I'm a chartered accountant, so I don't find talking to investors that challenging. I think we've had some like really silly problems, and one of them I'm trying to get across at the moment is I send investment updates, but I send them as a BCC from my own email address. Turns out that triggers a lot of junk mail. And so I've had investors contact me like, why haven't I heard from you for, so I've been sending you emails, here, this, and this, basically. And they're like, no, you haven't. And, and then you realise, I found it in my junk. And you're like, oh, so you're really bent out of shape. You're not doing, you have to get them to sign stuff from time to time and all that. And it's like, oh man, this is not what I wanted to happen, basically. So that's a silly thing. But also I probably need to get better at investor relations, right? I need to get better at, self-reflection. You need to say more to investors at the right times, basically. But that's kind of the problem with investor relations, certainly as the CEO role, is it's like an endless element to it. You could do it all day, every day, basically. It could just be your job. That's where like Codex have been fantastic, actually. They've been really good at helping keep investors up to date and properly like onboarded and with the right levels of information and helping us tell the story in the market properly. I think challenges just for the business generally is is supply chain. We have two suppliers, right? That's bikes, and the bicycle supply chain fell to pieces in coronavirus, so that was a real pain. And the other one is money. And if we don't get our funding correct, we can't fund the bikes because we have to lend these things out. So the two things are the two biggest challenges we face as a business right now. Now, supply chain seems to come back together with bicycles, and the money side of things seems to be coming together nicely with the Series B and stuff. So actually, supply chain is beginning to not look like a massive problem. And so actually, it's really exciting for me. Like, I'm quite invigorated by this because we're now sort of talking about routes to market, product strategy, all this sort of stuff. And it's like actually we can finally begin to move that side of the business really far forward. So
yeah, because the bulk of the main part of what you've been doing has been throughout the pandemic. And I can see how that the pandemic for a business like yours makes it very difficult to run, but actually makes everyone want to use your business. Yeah. Is that what you found?
That's right. Well, yeah, but the trouble is that you found that like, it wasn't, I'd say it was net negative for the business, right? And that's people go, what, your bicycle business? So it was easy selling it. Yeah, it was really easy selling bikes. And that means that when you do what we do, which is offers a disruptive, better way to get a kid's bike, well, it doesn't make a difference because everyone wants a bike. So they'll buy one, they'll rent one, they'll do whatever they want. So actually your 10x better way of doing this, we fundamentally, we know that we're a better way for families to get cycling, right? That's what we believe. And it means that when everyone goes crazy for bikes, no one cares. They'll go anywhere to get a bike, basically. So that was annoying. And I suppose the second bit is we couldn't get the supply chain to hit our numbers. You just can't do it. We were too junior a business or too small a business going into the pandemic to be able to have those deep relationships with suppliers. And now coming out of the pandemic, we've actually got really good relationships. So actually we're much more managed on that front. But like, it was sort of, we were like the total perfectly wrong size to be going into the pandemic, basically. And as a result, I think all bicycle businesses have like had levels of challenge coming from the pandemic, right? The big retailers who are sitting on a lot of stock, they had a good time. But actually, you're talking to manufacturers, they're like, yeah, it's been really annoying because we actually can't build the bikes. The part suppliers have put the prices up. So in fact, our margins, you might think we're making loads of money, we're not, because the inputs are changing. Smaller businesses like scaling businesses like ours are like, yeah, we actually haven't been able to get the bikes to scale. That winds up on investors because they're like, why are you not hitting your growth targets? Because that's fundamentally what they're buying, it's growth. And you're like, well, I can't grow if I don't have the bike to fucking rent it. That's sort of, yeah, it's been a bit of a pain, to be honest.
Understandable. So what would you say to someone who's like 4 years behind you? Someone who's looking to start their investment journey, whatever. They've just started their business going. They've not had any chats with any investors yet.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm part of a few groups and you get asked this quite a lot, like, how do you do it? How do you raise this stuff? And it's like, I think it's serendipity is like a big word in this, right?
It's not what they want to hear.
No, I know it's not what they want to hear. But I think there's a couple of things I'd say. So we got lucky. I got lucky in two elements with Mike, not only as a mentor but also as an investor as well. That was really, really helpful. But there are a lot of angels out there who are looking for a really good opportunity to back it. I think you need to be ready to. So I didn't just go after Mike because there's some weird family connection. I went after Mike because he rented assets or leased assets, put them in a room and charged you access to them. I lease assets, I put them in your garage and charge you access to them. There's a very big similarity between my business and the gym business. And so I knew Mike was going to get it, right? If you were to go after ultra rich bankers and you're trading on sort of kombucha or something like that, it's just not going to work. They're not going to get this whole thing. So you've got to I think you do need to target people who you think would genuinely be interested. And most ex-entrepreneurs make excellent angel investors because they really get it and they can help you along the journey. And actually, they're really inquisitive people by nature. They'll be like, oh, actually, that's kind of cool. I want to hear a bit more about what you're doing and I want to sort of understand it, basically. And then in fact, if you do get, as I say, a successful entrepreneur will just take that meeting, and in fact they will get like, yeah, you're going to need about 100, 200 grand to get something going, right? They'll to really see if it works, and they'll be ready to risk it, basically. I think there's all that noddy stuff like around EIS, SEIS, all of that. Get that stuff sorted, find out where you are. We couldn't get it, so we've ended up with offshore investors and all sorts. So yeah, that's one of the ways we go around it. Offshore investors can't benefit from EIS, but if you go to places like Gibraltar, where there's like a lot of British people who really get the UK economy, they actually want to invest in UK businesses because they happen to trade in pounds down there. So in fact, they don't care about EIS and they'll go in with you. And then look for your strengths, tell the story. We're an asset heavy business, so it makes us a lower risk, if you like. And so as a result, you can tell that story when you're at seed stage. Be like, look, I'm just going to use your money to buy bikes and maybe a couple of laptops. It's not like it's going to be that risky. If this goes wrong, we'll probably get our money back. So that's still probably true today. We sit on tens of millions of pounds worth of kids' bikes. So fundamentally those are ours. And so yeah, try and find the downside story and highlight what can go wrong, what can go right there. And I think also just go through the kind of what is the actual plan here. You don't just raise money just for the sake of it. You're going to raise 200, 300 grand. That's a reasonable seed round. It's not great. It's not going to get you that far. But it will allow you to sort of prove a bit of commercial viability and all of that, and get there. I'd stay away from any angel investor who doesn't pay your salary. That is total joke, totally not market. I'd also try, if you can, to put like 75% change thresholds within any kind of contract, basically, rather than 100% change thresholds. That's a really technical point, but it's just, as your business scales, you need to be able to move things around and make sure it's a majority who are leading it, rather than that's a big majority leading it, rather than having holdouts, effectively.
Cool. Okay. And let's round it off a little bit now.
Okay.
Last question is always the question left by the previous guest.
Right.
The previous guest has asked you, what is something you do all the time in your business that you wish you didn't have to do?
Right. In my business.
Yeah, so you can't say changing nappies.
Yeah, because I was going to say at home, I've got 3 young kids and we change nappies the whole time. In the business, I and my FD hates this. I hate doing my expenses. And we use one of my personal credit cards for still a huge, to give you some idea, I think our total amount owing to Amex at Christmas was somewhere in the £300,000 mark. And yeah, so one of those is mine, and I have to do a whole load of expenses every month, and I hate doing it, basically. And yeah, and if I don't do it, I'm personally liable, so I have to do it. So it's, a total nightmare. But yeah.
Expenses.
It's weird because I'm doing expenses at KPMG and hating it there. When I have my own business, I'm not going to, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah.
No, that just follows you, that crap.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's what's also weird about startup land is people think, I'll quit this bank where I get paid amazingly and I'll do this startup and I'll be paid amazingly. It's like, no, the pay's going to be worse for quite some time. And then also, a lot of the sort of hassle of working still just follows you. You still have all of these pain points. You still have IT issues. It's still there, effectively. The fun bit about startup land is you get to build something, and that's what's really cool. And we love that. We've got thousands of delighted parents who are part of Bike Club, and they empower us to keep moving forwards and keep disrupting the market, basically.
Thanks so much, James.
No, it's a pleasure.
That's been an amazing episode. I think everyone's going to be sat there thinking, yep, I'm ready to go and seek out my investment now.
Well, good luck and reach out if you ever need any advice.
Thank you very much.